Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a very special partner spotlight for you prepared. Joining Sitruna, which is one of the biggest Amazon agencies helping sellers expand globally, and a 3PL provider, so two in one. And joining us today, we have the founder, Stephen Harris, and Head of Business Development, Beth. Hi both, thank you so much for joining us. I will just hand over to you for a brief introduction and to start the presentation.
Awesome, thank you so much, Patrick. Quick intro from me. So I head up business development here at Sitruna. My background is in Amazon. So worked at Amazon HQ here in the UK for just under 6 years across various different departments within Marketplace. So always working with third parties and brands on the Marketplace side. Stephen, I'll let you do an intro.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I founder of Sitruna. Started it 6 years ago. Previously to that, actually worked with Beth at Amazon as well. So we've known each other for a long time. And I also created a brand called Beachmore Books, which we've sold now. But one of the most fun things there was to try and sell in every possible Amazon marketplace. So really interesting topic for me today because I've done it from the many times on the agency, but also went through the whole process myself as a small business.
Amazing. So I'll let you guys carry on with the presentation, and then we will have time for Q&A at the end. So everyone, please feel free to put your questions in the chat, whatever platform you're watching us, and we'll go through them towards the very end of the webinar.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm going to kick things off, guys, and give you a little bit of an intro on Sitruna, who we are. So Stephen and myself, we're a full-service Amazon agency and 3PL based here in the UK. Now, our aim is that we really want to cut through the complexity of Amazon. We want to fix inefficiencies so that we can turn Amazon into a profitable and a scalable channel for brands and for businesses. As Stephen said, we've been around for about 6 years now. We've helped over 350 different brands succeed on Amazon in that time. And the way that we do that is we're full service offering. So we offer tailored solutions to each and every brand. So you can see that on the screen there, all of the different areas in which we operate, including logistics with our own 3PL. Now, I'm not going to go into any more detail about us. We're going to dive into the topic and start talking a little bit more about tariffs and that untapped potential of Amazon EU in 2025. So there's a lot of noise in this area currently. I don't need to tell you that. We don't want to add to that. Instead, we really want to bring a positive conversation to the mix and start talking about how we can take advantage of the opportunities that are being born out of this current chaos, as it were. Before we go into detail about that, I'm going to hand over to Stephen, who's just going to cover off the current situation and what it means for us right now. So next slide with Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. So I guess, as you said, there's no point in sort of going into a lot of detail because probably would be different by next week or next month for sure. But one thing that does show is there's a lot of uncertainty right now and has been for the whole year in terms of importing to the US, tariffs in the US, in a way that just makes it quite hard to plan profitability, to plan supply chains. And a lot of the brands we're working with have found that they're creating stock and they're not sure whether to leave it in China or Vietnam, wherever it's coming from, leave it there, ship it to the US, ship it to somewhere else. And that creates a lot of difficulty for businesses. And I think even more so on Amazon, because the margins are so tight with FBA fees, with referral fees, with advertising costs. A lot of brands can't afford to have their cogs double or in some cases even more than that. So what we obviously, there's the financial aspect of expanding to other countries that from a tariff perspective can be cheaper. But what we've really found has been beneficial for a lot of our brands is providing an additional outlet. You're able to sell to hundreds of millions of customers outside of the US in a way that provides a bit more diversification. And I mean, UK went through it a few years ago with Brexit, US now, like there's always the measure of things changing. And one of the great things about Amazon is that it's a really great global marketplace. So if anyone that's just selling in one marketplace, there's a huge opportunity to use the same ASINs, the same reviews, the same setup, to really deal with that uncertainty and have that flexibility to move stock from one place to another. Tariffs is a big one, seasonality, economic trends as well. So there's some information here about what's been going on in terms of like going from 70%, 145%, then back down to 55%. Won't go into detail on that. But yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we found when speaking to many brands with Avask and with clients that we have is that the EU provides a really good way to deal with that uncertainty of not knowing if that stock you're getting produced can be shipped immediately to the US or potentially needs to be rerouted elsewhere.
Absolutely. And off the back of that, then, speaking a little bit more to where that EU UK opportunity comes in, as Stephen said, there's many different factors behind why EU UK can be a great place to expand into. There's the global opportunity when it comes to Amazon, but EU UK specifically, let's talk about some figures about why this region is a good place to start your expansion journey with, or have next on your list. So you can see there's some stats on the screen right now. If we're looking at just EU e-com market in general in Europe, that's projected to reach 915 bill by the end of this year. So significant growth potential happening there. If we're zooming in to look at Amazon's e-com share specifically, while yes, US marketplace does remain the largest with an estimated 375 billion in GMV in 2023, looking at the EU Amazon ecosystem, it's rapidly gaining ground. So reaching a combined 201 billion GMV across the 5 major markets available over here. So that's UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. And what that means is that it's the leading marketplace for Europe. So although US still represents a larger share of global e-com, Europe's offering a substantial and a really under-leveraged growth opportunity, especially, as Stephen alluded to, for sellers who are already optimized for Amazon's infrastructure. So if you guys are out there in the States, you're selling on Amazon US, you're optimized for that infrastructure, you're familiar with it, it makes that transition and that expansion across the pond a lot easier. You're starting from a point of advantage. You can see as well, we've got some country-specific stats on the slide before, but also on this slide, just giving you a bit of an idea. Germany and UK leading the way substantially with their market sizes, but the smaller locales such as Spain, they're seeing really high levels of growth also and are continuing to do so. So I'll let Stephen just go through a few points on this side, talking about characteristics in particular of different category sizes and other info for each of the main markets over here in Europe.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, so I think this is the question we often get, which is, what sells in Europe? What's going to sell? And I think my first answer is anything. UK, Germany in particular, but also France, Italy, and Spain to a lesser extent. Amazon is by far the dominant platform, and so you want to buy anything on Amazon or on e-commerce. Sorry, Amazon's the main point of call. So as with the US, there are things like electronics that are huge categories. But the first thing to say before we go into detail is like there's still a really good opportunity for those niche products. And actually, there's far fewer competitors, far fewer niche products in Europe. And so many products, even though the market's smaller, that might be super saturated, like the garlic presses of Amazon in 2020, is a lot less saturated than, say, for Spain. And so there's lots of opportunities there. Smaller pond, as Beth said, but it's still big enough to sustain quite a lot of sellers and quite a lot of GMV. I think there are some trends, as Beth said. Germany and UK are the biggest. We'd often recommend going to UK first from the language barrier. For a lot of sellers, it's a lot easier. You don't have to translate your labels. And Germany, we recommend as the first EU mainland country, unless you've got a specific sort of like product that's more attractive in Spain, France, or Italy. But Germany is, as you can see, a lot bigger than the rest. One other thing that's really interesting about Germany is they have a very high order frequency. So lots of customers there shop on Amazon, not far off weekly. UK tends to have a higher per capita spending, and they have the highest like average basket value as well on the UK. So for more expensive products, UK is a great one to look at. And then France, France and Spain are ones which have maybe slightly lower demand, both from the market size, but also France has more, in particular, has more competition. So there are other channels like discount, like Fnac. Not to say, I mean, it's 35% of the market, so it's still pretty big, but maybe a slightly less dominant opportunity than Germany and the UK. And then Spain lower because it's a smaller country, but really dominant. Italy, and then Spain, I think, is the one in which we find generally has the least sales, but can be really good for certain products. So we work with, for example, a supplement seller who does amazingly well in Spain because their product is really good for the Spanish climate, first of all, and also it's quite hard to get in Spain. And so they've got very, very little competition, and Spain is actually equaling what they do in the US. So there's huge opportunities in all these markets. But for sure, Germany and UK are the biggest. In terms of categories, we've got the detail here, but some of the themes, as with the US, electronics is the biggest category across Europe. Home and kitchen is really good. And we also have in the UK in particular, a lot of FMCG. So a lot of food, a lot of drinks that do really well in the UK, more so than in mainland Europe. I think a lot of people here are used to just buying, groceries and also bulk FMCG on Amazon. So big opportunity there as well.
If I may jump in on this one, actually a question that came up just now. We do have some clients who deal with FMCG products, specifically around food and drink. Do you see that with the EU, they're not as inclined maybe to expand to some countries due to the fact that some of these products are not able to be sold via the Pan-EU program? Just something that comes up quite often in our conversation. So I was wondering, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, for sure. So Pan-EU, if anyone's not aware, is where you can ship into one country and then Amazon distribute it for free across all the European countries. And most FMCG is excluded from that, which means you need to send it into each country individually and maintain maybe 5 warehouses. I think that's often a very big blocker, as you say, to going to all 5 at once. But having said that, what often people can do is start at, say, Germany and UK. So you start at 1 or 2 warehouses. But although Amazon don't distribute, it's very easy to distribute. So we work with quite a few brands that have generally Netherlands because of the ease of import, but it can be anywhere, that has a single 3PL warehouse. And that 3PL in Europe, or we also do it at Sitruna Logistics in the UK, is the European base. And it's a lot easier to ship from that one base into France, Spain, and Italy when you're selling FMCG. Other side benefit of that is you need kind of the ingredient labeling and stuff, and having different warehouses allow you to sort of be a little bit more flexible with your labeling. But yeah, it's definitely a kind of a flag that on the flip side, when you do have the Pan-EU, when you're not FMCG, it's way easier because Amazon effectively, aside from the language, which does complicate things, effectively can treat all of the EU as one overall marketplace, similar to how you do in the US.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, talking a little bit more about this diversification and using EU and UK to achieve that while things are pretty uncertain at the moment. Stephen's touched on a few of these points already, but if we're going from the top of the pyramid up, first and foremost, large, massive market that you get access to. So it's over 450 million potential customers from the framework that you're already familiar with selling on Amazon US, and they not quite, but at the click of a button, expanding over into EU, you're getting instant access to over 400 million new customers. It's a massive potential. And the reason that it's so attractive to be able to do this in the EU are 2 points. One, the middle piece here in the pyramid, that established infrastructure. So everything is so unpredictable right now. These regions have established regulatory frameworks and infrastructure that make it a hell of a lot easier to set up that international presence and to tap into the markets. And then we look to the top there of competitive advantage that Stephen mentioned. These markets are a lot younger than the US, and many of your competitors have not yet tapped into at all the markets. The competition is a lot lower, and you have a lot more space to capture market share more easily than the very crowded and saturated US e-com space that we're seeing. So it's now that the opportunity is to gain that competitive advantage by diversifying into EU, UK, establishing your presence early on. And I think with everything that's going on right now, it's almost a forcing function for a lot of brands. But getting into the space while it's still early days in terms of competitor saturation is what's really exciting. And with the right strategy, you can leverage those established compliance structures and the growth trends in individual locales to drive your business forward. So that's what this opportunity is presenting when we're looking at it from a diversification standpoint. If we go on to the next slide, fantastic. Now, if we look a little bit more at what the key is to capitalizing on this growth, it's understanding the unique dynamics and the customer nuances in each locale. So there's a number of steps to actually navigating that EU expansion. So I'm going to talk about these now, and feel free, Patrick, Stephen, to break into these different points because there's a lot that we can talk about here. It's a very rich area. There's a lot of specificities. Feel free to put those questions in the chat as well. But let's have a little look at this from the top down. So first and foremost is your market entry strategy. So we've looked at some exciting data points there, particularly looking at the different categories within each of the EU locales. But what you want to be looking at is which locales hold the most opportunity for your brand, for your product, whichever category or subcategories that you're present in, based on what does the competition look like in your category in that locale, looking at search traffic, customer demand, really looking at the market analysis there. You want to define which country is best to start with. As Stephen said, we don't advise going full EU5 all in one go because that's a lot to manage right from the off. Start with one main locale to set up your EU hub, to get your baseline, to get your baseline set up. Usually UK when we're coming across from US. Optimize your logistics, set up that central hub for the expansion outwards from there. Largely speaking, as we've said, UK works best. It's the same language. It's an easier initial transition from your existing US success that you'll have. And that allows you to focus your efforts on some of the more time-consuming elements, which are tax, VAT, compliance. Bringing me on to the next point. We're talking VAT, we're talking EORI numbers. I'm not going to go into that in too much depth because Patrick's going to cover that in a moment. But what you need to make sure is that you're looking at your tax compliance, for example, well in advance because it can take some time and that can be a blocker into you entering into the market. You also need to be looking at product compliance. So which category do your goods fall under? What are the country-specific requirements, which I will warn you there are many depending on which EU locale you're looking to enter into. Now, I know that partners like Avast can advise on some of these areas, but what you want are Amazon compliance specialists to really help you nail the compliance piece. We partner with an EU provider here, Complizen, who's in the space, and they're really great at just helping you navigate what it is that you need to work through from a client compliance perspective before you can even set up shop here. Moving on to logistics, that third point. How are you getting your stock here? Again, there's many different options out there for you to cover your cross-border freight, getting your stock across the pond, but you want to then be thinking about 3PLs on the ground in country who can help prep and inbound your stock into your chosen EU fulfillment centers with Amazon. So as Stephen was talking about, we can talk a bit more in depth about the different options for utilizing Amazon's network, fulfillment network in EU, but pan-EU, that piece of inbounding to one hub within Europe, Amazon moving that around for you, or partnering with a really good 3PL to enable that if you can't access pan-EU. That's something that you want to spend some time thinking about what's going to work best for your brand. Once you've got these three areas covered, you've got the practicalities checked off for safely inbounding your stock, for making sure you can set up shop. You need to look at the country nuances affecting your strategy. So Amazon EU UK, very different to the US. Different strategy is required. It's a very different look and feel. As we said, it's less saturated. And having that expertise is going to make all the difference for you making sure you can reach your full potential and taking that market share. Not only knowing the different market landscapes, but practical measures such as translations, your SEO optimizations in accordance with all those cultural differences as well. There's a hell of a lot to consider when we're looking at what that localized expertise needs to be so that you have the best strategy to execute. Now, as Stephen mentioned, working through these difficulties ourselves with the in-house brand that Stephen grew and scaled, Beachmore Books, we've really tried hard to create a one-stop shop solution because we know how painful it is as a brand trying to expand in a country that you don't have physical presences and trying to navigate all of these different areas that influence how you can make success in that country. So we're working closely with the likes of Ask so that you can have your tax advisor, you can have the likes of Compliazon, who are EU's leading body for compliance regulation. You can have cross-border logistics, freight advisors all in one space so that you can speak to all of those partners, understand fully what does the timeline look like, what do my blockers look like, what are the ETAs that I need to set in motion right now before I can even think about getting my Amazon store up and running and live. So we're working hard to bring all of those partners under one roof for brands so they're able to have those conversations early on and know exactly where they stand with the journey that's ahead of them for that expansion piece. Lots that we've covered there. I don't know if we want to go in a little bit more detail of any of those 4 stages.
I think one thing that's interesting is that these are all not Amazon EU expansion steps, but generally EU expansion steps. So particularly in FMCG, actually, we've worked with brands that have used Amazon as an entryway into the market. Firstly, because Amazon are very strict, and so it means that if you qualify for the Amazon rules, you're going to be fine for kind of general retailers on the whole. So that's a really great way. Almost Amazon can educate you on what you need because they will physically ask you for your waste regulations and sanitary tax and all this kind of random stuff that maybe is a bit more unknown. And it's also a really great way to kind of prove traction. So you can bring your product from the US into, say, Spain, generate some sales traction on Spain, and then use that traction alongside the compliance to then go to other retailers, other distributors, and have a little bit more sort of like local presence versus being a totally offshore launching into the new market conversation. So I think it's a great way to grow your Amazon sales, but also a really great way for you to then grow off Amazon within the EU.
Awesome, and it's good to see the roadmap that you've put there, and just sort of visualize, what steps needs to be taken. Of course, one of those steps, a big step nonetheless, is compliance, of course. So from our perspective, really, we, as of Ask, we try to make this as seamless as possible, and like you guys mentioned with Sitruna, you try to be the one-stop shop solution for Amazon sellers. It's something that we are striving to do as well with compliance. Of course, compliance stretches to so many different topics. It's not just VAT compliance, it's also EPR compliance and customs. And you have the regulatory compliance, which you mentioned. You have your product and labeling compliance. So there's so many different topics. It's easy to get lost in it, but that's why we always recommend to speak to ourselves, to one of our partners, just to get lots of advice, take it on, and consider, what needs to be done. Of course, with VAT compliance, that's one of the key things that you will need to ensure is in place before expanding to these countries. Specifically, here I just want to mention to plan ahead, especially if there's a specific date in mind of when you'd like to launch in one of the countries. For example, a lot of our clients, when they approach us, they will have Q4 as the date in mind, as does pretty much everyone, as they want to launch by Christmas. And sometimes they are cutting it close when it comes to making those preparations, because the VAT registrations in some of the major markets can take 2, 3, even 4 months in some instances. And the documents that are required, just like Beth and Stephen mentioned, can be extensive, especially country by country. Each country has its own tax office. They operate on a completely different basis from each other, and they have their own requirements, their own processes. So, of course, it's something that we can certainly guide you through and help you process through these applications, but it's something to keep in mind, specifically the timeframes, because there's nothing worse than having everything else in place, having your stock, having your shipping provider sorted, having your listings and everything, and then missing that one key part to be able to actually sell in these marketplaces. And then moving on to EPR, it sort of feels like a new legislation, although in the EU it's been around in some countries for over 20 years. But the reason why it feels new is because the marketplaces are now in control of enforcing some of the regulations. So when you sell on Amazon in particular, you will find that in certain countries you won't be able to list your products unless you are complying with EPR. Which is just echoing what Beth and Stephen said about Amazon being quite strict with these regulations, which is very much a good thing because, again, when you start selling on Amazon, you then know, moving on to other marketplaces, you're pretty much already compliant because you already had to go through all of these. So with EPR, it refers to something that we just simply call an eco tax. And it's all to do with making sellers, producers, manufacturers more responsible for the waste that they put on each market. So to think about it is if you send 10,000 units of a specific product into a country, eventually that product has to be disposed of and has to be recycled. And that really is a black hole when it comes to the government. It just comes out from their funding. It's the local taxpayer that has to fund it. So they are making each seller who's introducing those products into the market just a bit more responsible for the waste. Then with customs, of course, when we are thinking about sending products into EU or UK, it's something that you will have to deal with. When shipping the goods, they arrive at the border, and then there's a process called the customs clearance process, which you have to go through which you need to provide certain documents to the customs authorities, just providing information about the products that you're shipping. And of course, they then have a chance to check your other regulations, make sure that you're compliant and make sure that you have everything set up correctly. So this is a key step, and it also references back those VAT and EPR registration, which will be required in order to ship goods into those countries. But all of these can seem quite like a lot. I mean, each of those points are only a small extent of what's required. However, there are a lot of different reasons why brands from outside of the EU have actually an advantage over EU brands. And that's because marketplaces, and specifically Amazon, they do take accountability for a lot of the compliance on behalf of sellers. And they do have certain responsibilities as well to collect the VAT, as an example, remit it to the tax offices, and also in some cases to report it to the tax offices. So if you are thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to deal with the tax offices myself, I'm going to have to pay them, I'm going to have to talk to them, that's not always the case, especially if you use an agent like ourselves. We pretty much handle all of that, and Amazon does help you as well. It's not something that an EU business could have as an advantage, because for the most part, they are responsible for a lot of their compliance. But for US brands, there is a lot of incentive, a lot of advantages in order to expand into these countries. And of course, partnering with the right companies, the right agencies, can only make that transition even smoother and even easier. But that's it from my side on the compliance. I think we'll move on. We have a case study next, I believe, which Beth and Stephen have prepared.
Sure. So I think we've got into lots of detail about why selling in the EU and also the things to think about. So I won't spend too long on this, but thought it'd be useful just to kind of lay out with one brand, a really top-selling baby brand in the US on Amazon, how they took that success into the EU, and just some of the blockers they faced. in their journey. So I think the background is they sell baby clothing, so quite a large catalogue. They've got to make sure they've got things like labeling and like lots, like it's not a super simple product. They need to make sure they're fully converted to the EU, but they had really good success on Amazon, and Amazon was driving their off-brand growth. So they got a lot of retail deals from their success on Amazon. And so when we were working with this brand, we could see a huge number of good 5-star reviews. There's a really good potential for them to sell in Europe. At the point in which they expanded on Amazon, they had no European presence, but it was something they wanted to do. And so we started off by launching in the UK, and that was about 7 months in the UK before they expanded into Europe. And when they went to Europe, it was actually EU4. So they did Germany, France, Italy, and Spain all together. They're now also in Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden, so like every available marketplace, but they're kind of in 3 stages. And what's really great is after just over 2 years, they're now #1 best-selling swaddle on Amazon UK. So seen huge success, and that was entirely from their success in the US, going through this kind of 2-year process. And now not only are they #1 on Amazon, but they've got a presence throughout Europe off of Amazon as well. So it's like a really great example of how the expansion into Europe drove significant growth for the brand, but that growth was also enabled by their prior success in the US. So it's really leveraging what they've already been doing to drive future success. So like what on the next slide, I'll just go through some challenges that they had, and then maybe go through the whole process as well. But I think the first big challenge they had, which is a challenge that thankfully Patrick and Avask are the best people to help with, is that the VAT wasn't straightforward. They tried to do it themselves. They have an accounting team. Wasn't a good idea. And I mean, they had to do the German application in German to office, and like got quite complex. But effectively, I think when they started working with Avask, it was a case of fill in these forms, upload it to this portal, and then just wait the required time. And that wait, I think, is really important. A lot of brands say, right, I want to sell in UK tomorrow, or I want to sell in Germany in 2 weeks, and it should be maybe 2, maybe 3 months. We've seen it take quite a bit longer as well because there's one document missing or something's wrong in a form submitted. And I don't think a lot of these European agencies are that great at sort of responding. You can't just often give them a call and get it fixed that day. And so they did have a problem. They actually, their launch was delayed by almost 7 months versus their very original this is one launch for. They had a really ambitious like 1 month plan. In the end, once that was sorted and logistics and everything else, it took them 7 months from day one rather than 1. So I think that's a really important point, that like make sure you don't think too short term. That being said, we've also had many other brands that have managed to do it in a couple of months. So it's not always going to take that long, but there is a range. The other thing they needed to do, which again contributed towards that 7 months, is they needed obviously to change the measurements. So they had US sizes, they needed UK and European sizes, and they needed European language labels. So France, Italy, Spain, and German, or French, Italian, Spanish, and German, and English on all of their labels. We, as Beth said, we have another partner who helped with that in terms of the labeling regulations. So they made sure they had everything in terms of the textiles and the sizing guides and the other kind of required information properly correct. So that was from a operational standpoint, from a knowing what to do standpoint, very straightforward and simple. But again, it's another consideration of the stock that's being created. It needs to be created with the correct labeling. It's not the case that you can always just ship what you have in the US into Europe. UK is easier because it's the same language, but it's still really important to note there are some specific requirements for the UK, particularly for things like supplements or food and drink, where you need to have certain ingredients highlighted, certain allergens highlighted, you need sizes in a certain way, you need a responsible person perhaps, which is a local address in Europe or in the UK. This is all stuff that Compliers on Avast can help with, but that really was what caused the delay on that brand. And that was their first big step. I think a alongside whilst we're doing compliance, we got the account set up, and we ported the listings across. That was actually very straightforward, and often is, because you can just get the same ASINs in US, bring them into Europe. Translation is a big step there. So making sure that we get everything not just translated with sort of ChatGPT or Google Translate, because if I'm sure some of you have seen the really poorly written English like battery pack listings on the US, you don't want to do that same thing in Germany. So it's important to get local translators. Again, we can recommend a really good company to do this, but they do what's transcreation. So translate the product, do local research on keywords, local research on how people understand that product. And the obvious one is product sizes is different. There's also different ways people talk about laptops versus notebooks and things like that, which I think is super important, which kind of links to that product fit in the baby category. There were different like baby grows, different swaddle trends. And so from number one, from the actual the size and type of product, but also there's quite different trends between like mainland Europe and the US in terms of designs. So a lot of the designs did really well in the US, didn't do well in the EU, but then some of the worst performing designs in the US did really well in the EU. So just making sure that for a lot of brands, when you have a wide catalog, really think about the product fit. Not so much does baby product sell in the EU, because the answer is yes, but it's like what colors sell, or what type of material is more popular. And again, that's something that you want to do up front before you sort of like send lots of stock in, and it's not always going to be a like for like to the US. So that was kind of all the pre-launch stuff. They got launched, having done all the compliance account set up. The biggest challenge for them was brand awareness at the start, because a lot of brands that have built up a following in the US are getting maybe off Amazon traffic from Instagram, or they're getting they're in retailers and people see them in a shop, as I often do, see it in a shop, go straight on Amazon and buy it for 20% less. And that free traffic really helps you rank. And you won't get that in the EU if you're launching from scratch. So porting the reviews across can be really good. Amazon reviews in the US are often way more positive than those in Germany. And so you're potentially going to have like a lot more 5-star reviews than a brand that originated in the local country, which helps with brand awareness. But what we did for this baby grow company is invested quite a bit in sponsored brand video in particular, to really kind of bring the brand across. Had some great product pages that were already in the US, but sponsored brand video, and then DSP we used. Baby is actually a great category for DSP because the audience targeting is quite a lot easier to do than some other categories, but it meant that we could show this brand to quite a lot of the correct audience in a short amount of time and build that brand awareness. But I think if budgets are lower, DSP certainly isn't a requirement in the EU or in Europe, but I think it's just worth bearing in mind that when you port across, that's often your first challenge. Your TAC costs will be higher. You don't have that organic visibility. And then logistics, something we've spoken about a lot. They've actually got one warehouse in Netherlands that does all of Europe for them, both on Amazon and off Amazon. Originally, they started with Sitruna in the UK. So we brought their stock into the UK in our warehouse. We then drip fed it into Amazon UK. From there, we then drip fed it into Germany for their European launch. And that made it really simple. And then the third stage was the Netherlands warehouse. And I think the reason it's good to kind of describe that is a lot of brands will look at, say, costs of pan EU or costs of shipping containers. And yeah, when you're at container level, it probably makes sense to get a warehouse here and a warehouse there. But for a lot of people, that gets overly complex in terms of the volumes. And so what we'd suggest is like use an easy way. So Amazon have AGL. If your stock's coming from China, they can take it pallet load from China straight to the UK, straight to Germany, at quite low cost. That's a really easy way to get into Europe. And then kind of the single European 3PL often can come a bit later on once you build that volume, which is the route that this brand took. But yeah, I think overall it's an example of a brand that has done really well at using the European opportunity, embracing the complexities upfront in terms of compliance, but using that to make sure that they didn't just rush the launch, but had a really considered launch with the right products. And as a result, they're now, as I said, a bestseller in Europe as well, and it's been really successful growth for them.
Awesome. Yeah, off the back of that, I think something that's hopefully coming across from Patrick's points on the compliance side, from Stephen and I's points on the vast amount of moving parts that are required for this, is that you need expertise in all of those areas. Trying to sit and tackle all of this by yourself, number one, it's just so overwhelming. Number two, the amount of time and admin that it would take up for you to wade through. And number three, as with Stephen's example of the baby growth brand trying to tackle just VAT by themselves and how much that prolonged the process for them, it's a lot. You really want to be looking at a really robust partner network to use in your journey for expansion. This isn't just into EU either. If you're looking to expand anywhere that's out of your home country, that's somewhere else where you're not present, you want that trusted partner network with experts in every single area to help make that a success. And with the EU, you've seen the opportunity size is there. So make sure that you're taking that considered approach and you're using the best expertise that's out there so that you can very sustainably approach this opportunity and make the most out of it. And summarizing that all up here, I just wanted to wrap things up, and Patrick's going to wrap things up from the practicalities from a compliance side. But once you've had time to adapt to those immediate situations that you've got ongoing right now in the US, you're looking at diversification. You're starting with market assessment first and foremost. Then you're looking at compliance, not just the VAT, the tax, the ERP, all of that side, but also your product compliance, super, super important. You're looking at your logistics, cross-border freight, and your local 3PL solutions for accessing that pan-EU fulfillment network. And lastly, that specialized support that addresses those locale nuances and the partners that you need to find and work with for not just entering into and accessing these markets, but so that you can have that continued profitable growth as well on Amazon. And as Stephen said, off Amazon, because it really does open several doors, accessing the markets through Amazon for all those off-Amazon opportunities. So that's wrapping up sort of the key takeaways from us in terms of the practicalities of what this journey can look like, but also from our lived experience, that importance of finding those partners. We know how overwhelming it can be, and we're always happy to help talk people through that. We've done our due diligence and partnered with some of the best in these spaces to take at least one headache away from you when you're starting to explore that journey. So yes, Patrick, I'll let you wrap up the takeaways from a compliance point of view.
Thank you, Beth. Yeah, it's a great conclusion, and from our side, it's just and essentially reiterating what we spoke about in terms of the compliance part. So again, just to circle back to what Beth and Stephen said, particularly around the VAT registrations, these we would always recommend to partner with an agent in order to go through the processes, simply because, as Stephen was saying, the tax officers that process these applications, you can't really give them a call. You can't really work with them as easily as you would with tax office in your own country, although I know that even in your own country, the tax office can sometimes be challenging. But particularly around all of these different EU countries, they all speak a different language. They all have their own processes, and they will require you to do things their own way. They won't sort of accept, just an application with some standard documents. They do need you to provide a lot of evidence, particularly just to support the need for a VAT number and to showcase that you're prepared to start making sales in that country, and that you've made all of these different preparations, such as having a warehouse, having your marketplace open, or having a shipping provider. So these these components will be really key in order to register in certain countries. Some countries require more than others, but for the most part, we can advise on all the requirements per each country and sort of outline what would be required, and as well suggest partners who can help you achieve some of these. So for our warehouse, Sitruna in the UK would be able to certainly set that up for you and also help with the Amazon management. But for something like shipping providers, we can suggest other partners too. So for us, the roadmap that we've laid out would be having the VAT application submitted as the first instance, and as soon as possible, really, depending, of course, on your plans and your own timeline for launch. But as I said before, the registrations can take several months in some countries. So this is always, from the compliance perspective, what we suggest to focus on first. From there, once your VAT numbers are live, you can apply for a URI number, which there's one required for the UK and only one for the whole of EU. So you don't necessarily need to obtain one per country in the EU, just one for the whole of EU. These registrations typically take a lot less time, so it's just an extension of your VAT number, normally a week or 2 weeks for most of the countries, and you'll have it. And this number is used in order to send your goods through the customs border into each of the countries, each of the markets. You also need to be mindful of EPR, which is the eco tax that we went over earlier. In some countries, this will be required before you can even start selling, particularly on Amazon, because they will require it in order to unlock your listings. But this, depending on the category, can also take several weeks or even months. So it's important to think about it as early on as possible. And for our in-house customs team, any needs with your shipments, they can essentially help with, particularly into UK and the EU. So a lot of the time when shipping specifically larger quantities, a pallet or even a container in some cases, you would need to have a customs broker to help you speak to the authorities and essentially provide that customs clearance process on your behalf. So this is something that certainly we can assist with as well. And of course, moving from the registrations themselves, you do have to manage the ongoing compliance. So for VAT registrations, you'll be required to submit monthly or quarterly filings. For the EPR registrations, you'll be required to submit typically annual reports, but some categories also require it on a monthly basis. And we're here to support you with that. Of course, we'll try to manage everything on your behalf, make it as seamless of a process as possible, and help you unlock as many marketplaces as possible from the compliance perspective. And speaking of which, one of the marketplaces that we can help you unlock now is Ireland, because it has recently launched with Amazon. They have opened the FBA center there, and they're really trying to drive a lot of attention to this market. So we have partnered with Amazon in order to offer free VAT registrations and 2 years of our compliance service. So for the next 2 years, you are sorted. You don't need anything else from the tax compliance perspective. Of course, we still recommend to speak to experts around the product compliance, around having your listings localized and having the management of your PPC and everything that goes into managing the Amazon account. But of course, from the tax perspective, you're sorted pretty much. So it's something that you really should take advantage of if you're thinking of expanding to a new market, or if you even thought about Ireland specifically. And the promotion is available until the end of this year, so end of December 2025. The condition is that you haven't previously had Ireland enabled in Seller Central, and that you upload your Irish VAT number to the account before the end of the year. From there, Amazon essentially provides reimbursement for the full fee of this service. And for the Irish market in particular, we are seeing a lot of attention, a lot of clients that are coming to us to expand. So the sooner you can get started, the sooner you'll be able to ship stock there, start your sales, and be as competitive in the market as you can possibly be. that is essentially it from my side. So before we move on to the Q&A portion, I just wanted to put details for contact here. So any questions around what Stephen and Beth have raised today, and particularly, of course, the services that I can provide, please feel free to contact them. You can see the contact details there on the screen. Same for us. I'm sure you know how to reach us, but for those of you who maybe not have heard of us before, you can find my email there on the screen and speak to me directly. And there's some other helpful links which are on the screen now. We'll be sharing the presentation after the webinar, so you'll be able to access this directly. And for now, we're moving on to the Q&A part. So any questions that you might have had during the presentation, feel free to put them on the chat. We'll allow a few minutes just for them to come through, and then we'll go through each one of them before we finish off for today. Okay, so we have a few questions coming through one of our chats. So I'll pick them at random, go through one of them. I think most of them are directed to you guys. So I'll open up the floor to you. But one of the first questions is around the logistics solutions that you offer. So the 3PL in the UK, if you could expand on that a little bit more.
Sure, yeah. Didn't actually talk about it very much, but we actually acquired a warehouse business when I sold Beachmore Books because of all the complexity over warehousing logistics at Amazon. So it's down 3 warehouses down in Yeovil, which is about 2 hours from London, and we provide full 3PL services. So Amazon fulfillment, FBA prep, sending stock into Amazon. We also connect with TikTok and Etsy and eBay and Shopify and all other marketplaces. We also do B2B orders and Amazon returns and removal orders. So effectively, what that means is that you can send your stock into us from wherever it's based, and we can act as that central hub, not just for Amazon, but also for any other D2C distributor, retail, any other sales. And I think what we try and do as I guess the USP for Sitruna Logistics is we're linked to, it's part of a big agency that has a lot of Amazon experts. So whenever often with a warehouse, you're speaking to a automated service that doesn't understand Amazon, doesn't understand e-com. It's just about, as warehousing has to be, is about margins and being as efficient as possible. And if you've seen any kind of videos on the warehouses in Amazon, it's like all about just getting that efficiency. But we have the option as well of the brand manager you work with via Sitruna Consulting can support on the warehousing and support that process. It's all kind of integrated. So customer service, hopefully, ideally, is like far better than you'd get at a normal warehouse, and also knowledge of customs of Amazon, of e-com in general is also quite a bit higher because there's those Amazon experts kind of working in the same company.
Awesome, perfect. We have another question here from Alice. Alice asks, what makes your Amazon strategy different compared to other agencies?
Good question.
I'm going to let Stephen take that one.
Yeah, good question. So I think there's like loads of stuff you can do on Amazon. And the things that we focus on in a general sense, and obviously I can go into detail on specific brands or with context, but in a general sense, we're full service and we look to make Amazon simple and profitable, which can mean loads of different things. A lot of brands come to us and they have an issue with like seller support, with brand name changes, with supply chain and logistics, and we have a solution for that, as well as the classic advertising. Our largest team as our ads team have got a lot of experience. So we obviously can talk about ad strategies and about promotion strategies and growth strategies, which, I mean, I'd like to say Sitruna are better than anyone else, but like everyone else will say that as well. So I think the thing that makes it unique is that we don't just focus on the marketing element. We do have the 3PL. We do have a team of 7 ex-seller support team members, as well as 5 ex-Amazonians from London, who can really help on unlocking the entire Amazon ecosystem, making sure you're on the right programs, making sure the blockers aren't there, so that when we get to the marketing and we run really good marketing or really good product pages with our graphic design team and our copywriting team, everything sort of plays together. And where that actually comes from is Beachmore Books. We were great at marketing. We had a stunning storefront. We had a really good A+ content, and we just could not stay in stock. And so it didn't matter. We just went out of stock and we lost ranking time and time again. And so that's kind of how we wanted to build Sitruna, a bit more looking at what is the real blocker to that profit. Sometimes it's ads, sometimes it's optimization, but very often it's also something else within the ecosystem.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I'd add to that as well, that final point, which I think really does set us apart, is that not only does Stephen have experience in building that brand himself, but members of the Sitruna team have sat and worked on that brand. So not only the strategy that they're sat advising you on, it's strategy that they themselves have been there, done that with the in-house brand that we've had. Having that experience on the brand side, as well as the agency side, as well as on Amazon HQ side, makes a massive difference.
Perfect. Thank you both. We have another question. This one came through our StreamYard chart, so I might be able to pop it on the screen for everyone to use, to see rather. Let's have a look. There we go. So it's from Ryan. Ryan says the free Irish VAT reporting isn't actually straightforward. There are some conditions that have to be met, right? For example, already some business interest from IE or contract from your supplier, specifically saying they will ship your things to IE. Perfect question. So with the Irish VAT registration, certainly there are some requirements that need to be met just from the tax office point of view. So they would need you to provide certain documents in order to actually register. And like you said correctly, Ryan, you do need to show some business interest from IE. So realistically for that, you essentially would ideally have made some sales to Ireland already. And actually, if you sell on the Amazon.co.uk site, then we've seen a lot of our clients have already made sales to Ireland without even knowing, simply because before the launch of the Amazon IE platform, a lot of the Irish consumers would purchase from the UK and just incur those shipping times, which were a little bit longer. So that's one way how you can essentially showcase interest. The contract with the shipper or supplier, that's no longer a requirement, which is fantastic. We managed to resolve that with the tax office and sort of explain to them how else we can provide some documents that showcase your intent to sell in the country. So the shipper contract will not be necessary anymore, but you do need to have the Amazon platform set up. So this is something that Beth and Stephen will certainly be able to help with. You would have to have the Amazon IE platform and some listings already there. Of course, you can enable listings without having the VAT number. That's only necessary if you're looking to store the goods there. So you can even enable the platform, make some sales, and then apply for the VAT number later on. Although I should say, for the promotion that's available until the end of the year, do consider the registration timeframe, which is about 2 to 3 months at the moment for Ireland. But perfect question. Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm just having a look through the other chats. We have a few more questions. So this one is from Michael, and I think it's for you guys. He says, what are the most common mistakes that you see brands make when trying to scale across Amazon EU?
I'll start with just the main one, which I think we've already touched on, but it's planning ahead. It's spending time now to really closely look at what your goals are, what that path to entering into those markets looks like, the wealth of compliance pieces that we need to cover, etc. It's taking the time, taking a breath to start with, and really going into detail about all of those moving parts that you need to get in place before you can set up shop, quote unquote, on Amazon, whatever platform you're going to enter into the UK EU markets. Because like Patrick's alluded to, I think there's brands that I've spoken to are like, fantastic, we do really well in the States, we want to launch in the UK, we want to launch in 2 weeks time, we've got everything ready to go. On the Amazon storefront side of things and their listings, VAT hasn't come through, or there's a trademark issue, or 3PL issues. I think for me that's the number one mistake that we see happening, and again that we're trying to work hard with webinars like this to try and educate people on, is exactly what that process looks like. And I think it's probably one of the reasons as well that so many US sellers have been reluctant to expand into EU UK, is because they go, oh my goodness, that's too many things. I'm not even going to bother approaching it. And that's why we're really trying to help break them down into manageable bite-sized chunks, explain exactly what is needed where, and provide you with the expertise to make that happen. So just take a deep breath at the start and really map out what your path to green looks like. Don't know if you have anything to add, Stephen.
No, I think that I agree with what you said. It makes sense.
Perfect. A few more questions here. This one is again from Ryan, although another Ryan. So this one is for you guys again. How do you adjust your advertising or listing strategies for different EU markets?
So I think the first thing is that for the listing in particular is the transcreation. So ensuring that the base listing, so for example, your English listing is taken and not just translated word for word, but translated with a local native speaker who does the keyword research, who does the transcreation, localizing the terms, and then also fitting to the, for example, you translate 200 characters of keywords in the UK into German, it's not going to be 200 characters anymore. So that's the first step. Then I think the more interesting one is on the advertising, which is actually quite interesting. Often we see people perform better in not their language than in their actual language, because they become much more data driven. So you need the initial context, right? You don't want to be bidding beach towel if you've got a tea towel. That's not going to work. But often once you've got that set of keywords and you're then harvesting from that, you're bid optimizing from that fully on the data, you kind of lose your bias. And so we've seen a lot of success in terms of that database optimization for advertising. And I think the third thing is just making sure we're actually putting the data in terms of like, what are the local reviewers saying? What are the most popular variations in each marketplace? Collating that and using that for product development. Because it will 100% be the case that an Italian customer will buy something different to a French customer, to an English customer, to a Canadian customer. And I think that's probably the biggest step that people miss, is they do all of the like upfront work, make great local listings, and then forget to check what all their Italian customers are saying on return requests, on review requests, customer messages. And so, make sure you're collating that for future development.
Amazing. We have one more question here, unless more come through. This one's from Josh, and he asks, how do you oh no, that's the one we've already gone through. That was from Ryan. Josh, where are you? I just lost you. Oh, there we go. Once you help launch a brand on Amazon, what KPIs do you focus on, and what do you tailor the most?
Good question. Short answer is it depends on the brand. Most popular KPIs are sales or profit. So some brands come to us and they want to grow. They want to grow brand awareness. They want to grow top line sales. And then obviously the secondary KPIs in terms of your ad spend, your TACOS, your conversion rate. But sales is the key one. For most of our brands, actually, though, profit is the key KPI, because that factors everything in, right? So we want to make sure your sales are growing to grow your profit. Your ad spend is more efficient to grow your profit, etc. And that, I think, adds a lot of focus that a lot of brands coming to us don't have a clear view of their profit. And one of the first things we do is we take your cost of goods, we put it into our software, we build a P&L, so it's really clear on a product level and on account level. And then we can then, for example, do advertising. You'll have some high margin products, some low margin products. We can spend more on the high margin, less on the low margin, and be a bit more technical. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of Amazon metrics that like CBR, CTR that are really good to optimize for as well. But I guess as an overall full service approach, its profit is the one that I always prefer the most.
Fantastic. Can't see any more questions coming through, so I think we can commence the Q&A part here. Just go back to this slide here, just for everyone to see the contact details again, and we'll be sharing, of course, the webinar recording and the presentation with you afterwards. So once again, thank you so much to Beth and Stephen for your involvement. The presentation was fantastic. It was very a lot of different topics that we usually speak to our clients about. So it's really good to see your point of view and all the knowledge that you can bring and share with us. So thank you once again for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick. And thanks everyone for joining. It's been great.